Welcome to the 3XR podcast. This week's episode was recorded following Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, where they made important announcements about the future of augmented reality. We're going to discuss some rumors around AR glasses that Apple's supposedly working on, and why we're excited about AR features that are available today and coming soon in the future. Enjoy!
Welcome to the 3XR podcast. We know a lot about 3D, and we're working to digitize the world one 3D model at a time. One thing that we're learning a little bit about is how to create a podcast. So join us each week as we talk about who we are, what we're doing here at 3XR, share new and emerging technology, and forecast what the XR future is going to look like. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Last time we connected, Mike, you shared a little bit about sort of the future of how you feel like XR is influencing events, and there was a bit of a hinting towards Apple glasses, and I think we did get into the topic a little bit, but it seems like there's been some new press and a handful of articles that have come out just over the past few weeks that are sort of hinting at some progress and some essentially paving the way towards Apple glasses. So figured we could use today just to talk about your thoughts, just talk Apple glasses. I know coming from a glasses wearer myself, I'm selfishly hoping that these glasses, when they do come out, are pretty and are something that I'm going to want to wear and not, an obstruction on my face. But would love to hear any thoughts that you have just on the topic of Apple glasses.
Yeah, I think it's a good, interesting, relevant conversation. Like you mentioned, we kind of touched on it in our last episode. And since then, we're, right now recording this at the end of June. Hopefully we get it launched in a relatively short period of time. But basically what just happened this week was Apple had their developer conference, announced, a lot of new features across their entire product line. One of the more interesting ones that we're watching pretty closely is ARKit 4. They've continued to iterate on the ARKit capabilities for the last few years. Each update brings a little bit more. We're on 3.5 right now. This is version 4. There's a couple new really interesting features, such as being able to localize and anchor content to the real world. That'll help, basically bring a product like Apple glasses to life. Other things that are related, not as directly, but maybe indirectly, is with Apple AirPods now. They've got spatialized audio coming. Spatialized audio allows a 3D piece of content in your, let's say, augmented reality vision. Produce audio that feels like it's coming from where it is in space. If you turn your head, it's going to continue to emit sound from the side. And so I think seeing, these things on the software level starting to come out, as well as the hardware that we've got now on the iPad Pro that has the LiDAR depth sensor. Mm-hmm. Another nice feature about ARKit 4 is that they're actually giving developers a little more access to that raw sensor data, which is something that I was excited to experiment with when they announced the hardware. And so we got the new iPad on day one, and then, the software just wasn't quite there yet to expose that much data, but now it is. And so I think we're going to see a lot of interesting experiences starting to get created over the next few months. And that kind of leads up into Apple Glasses product launch. It probably won't happen this year, but you can see how developers that have the tools now to create experiences on an iPad or an iPhone can now take those same experiences and bring them into something that you see through your glasses. I think we're still limited in the experiences that developers are going to be thinking about, because they're still focused on looking through a piece of glass that you're holding. And once we actually have, heads up glasses, there's going to be things like navigation, or maybe converting people's speech in real time, that you'd want to be looking at them to see, maybe it's real life speech bubbles or something that has language translation, for example. You wouldn't necessarily hold your iPad up while you're looking at somebody to see the speech bubble. So those types of things, I think, won't be developed immediately unless Apple's developing them internally. But we probably will see more, AR experiences, from stuff we've been building and seeing for a long time, where you can configure or display products in your space, to, games like Pokemon Go that are interactive and bringing an element of, characters jumping out and hiding within an environment. So I think we'll continue to see that evolution happening. And the location anchors, more than anything, will open up multiplayer content. And that's one of the things I think that's been somewhat missing from, these XR experiences in general. Especially in VR, it's been often thought of as being an isolated experience. We're seeing more and more multiplayer content, and we talked a bit about networking and opportunities to have meetups in kind of a VR space. These, AR experiences that share local data allow you to have kind of a combination of the two. So you're bringing your digital experience to your environment, and it's still a little bit cumbersome right now to be holding a device in front of you, but you can see how this kind of software unlocks the next step of, if there was, let's say a piece of hardware like Apple glasses, now you have a bunch of apps that run natively in 3D and are using the location and are doing something interesting, and now you don't have to hold up a device anymore. So it's good that the tools are getting out there for developers, and it feels like it's hinting at Apple launching a product in the near couple years.
Cool. One thing I just thought of, do you feel like Apple glasses will essentially make headsets part of this like obsolete and sort of like an archaic?
Yeah, it definitely feels like the traditional VR headsets that we have today have a very limited shelf life. I was talking to another software developer earlier this week, and we were discussing how sometimes it's hard to believe how fast technology changes. When the example that we're discussing was the BlackBerry. And the idea being that when that first came out within, the office environment that he was working in, it felt like a cutting edge piece of software, but, we kind of knew like, all right, within 5 years, this thing's going to be, a paperweight or a doorstop. And then, the thing that he thought was interesting is what's the technology that's going to make, today's smartphones and tablets feel like a useless paperweight in the next 5 years. And it feels like glasses are that kind of type of technology that's going to really be evolutionary and make us wonder, like, how do we, interface with these physical screens as long as we did. But until it actually shows up, it still feels a little bit like a hope and a dream versus a reality. But we've seen over time, year and year again, the new products come out, every decade or so that really do fundamentally change the way we're interfacing with digital information. And, all the components are there, from, finger tracking to, the lightweight optics and whatnot to project digital images. I think the, devices are still going to be reliant on, a phone or an iPad that would be locally processing all the information. But, as an accessory, like, the same way Apple Watch kind of pairs with the iPhone, it feels very natural and logical that would be an accessory that they'd want to launch, especially if they're trying to keep the price point low rather than pack everything in like a HoloLens does. You can, complement the compute and the battery power with a smaller, more lightweight pair of glasses that still has to do, things that are fairly sophisticated, like feeding video or LiDAR data in, and then processing light and images, but it's not as intense as all the work that the phone would be doing.
Yeah, I wonder if, like, from a pricing standpoint, if headsets will be in direct competition now with the glasses, and if they'll have to pivot, if, say, the HoloLens or any of these other, like standard, very, very well-known names in the headset world, if they'll have to pivot and sort of create the streamed, like the version that can go on my glasses, or like,
yeah, and a lot of companies have been working towards that, right? And they've been wanting to kind of like build that, and we've seen fairly lightweight things like this company called North that has a product called Focals. Those are probably about as close as a commercial product to regular glasses. The frames are a little bit thicker to support some of the optics. They're not necessarily as capable as what people are hoping like an Apple glasses might offer. But it's an insight into how some of these existing manufacturers are thinking about reducing the form factor. On the VR side, it's still kind of a brick that you strap to your face, which, again, to our point earlier, doesn't feel like it's going to be a long-term piece of hardware that people are going to want to hang on to. But in the short term, it's kind of enabling you to see that full field of view and, jump into a game world. I think for the VR side of things, it's going to take some time before augmented reality and like thin glasses like you're wearing would be able to replicate the immersion and that kind of field of view. We've seen the trend with VR glasses becoming, wider and wider. The original like Oculus Rift first development kit was about 90 degrees field of view. So you can kind of see to the side, and then you get a black, cone. In some ways it looks like looking through, paper towel tubes, and you're losing that peripheral vision. In VR, the headsets have gotten bigger and bigger, and the field of view keeps, expanding. There are some that's like, 200 plus field of view, which is typically more than we can see as humans. So these headsets are even bigger and bulkier, but they offer, really interesting simulator experiences. So for, learning how to fly planes or something, it might make sense. But for the average consumer that just wants to interact with some digital content, I think we're going to see them preferring, something lightweight like glasses, but they'd still see the real world. The VR, field of view effect is going to require different technology that would be able to fully block out light in the world. So I think that the AR glasses that we'll see in the next few years are still going to be a separate path from a VR headset. And the VR headset is probably never going to be really made to look good because you're typically wearing that in isolation somewhere, and ideally connecting with someone through the internet to have a real world experience with them. But the outer part of the headset doesn't really have to look that good for a VR experience, whereas an AR experience it really does, because you're wearing it presumably out into the real world, you're interacting with people. The benefit of AR is that you're not disconnected and you can still make eye contact and look through the device. And so I think the form factor in that case is a lot more important than what it might be for VR.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So I guess headsets won't go away completely.
Probably not anytime soon, just based on the, that field of view that people want to encompass. And it may be that it's a different technology altogether, like contacts or implants or, an eye patch, who knows, like something that would be very different, I think, from what we would see from an augmented reality glasses point of view, as well as a traditional VR kind of brick point of view.
Interesting. Yeah. And I guess from a gaming standpoint too, like you're never going to want to put on just these glasses for the game. It almost, you feel like you're, to your point, it's the field of view and what you can see per headset. The gamers are after a certain.
Yeah, it's a different use case, right? You want to be immersed somewhere else, and you want to, take away everything that's in your environment so that you can replace it completely digitally and feel like you're somewhere else.
Right.
And so the AR glasses just kind of serve a different purpose. So it feels like there's going to be kind of a parallel path for some period of time, but I do feel like, we're going to see in a decade or so completely different technology that makes, the headset bricks already, looking at some of the older ones, they look fairly antiquated. So you can only imagine in a decade that those are going to be a lot, different looking, let's say. But the glasses are probably going to be the ones that focus more on the style and things that you have to wear outdoors, which is another, interesting challenge that I don't think people know what Apple's solution is yet, but they've got a number of different interesting patents out there. And with the outdoor location tagging now that they're unveiling essentially with this new iOS 14 upgrade, it feels like they're positioning the device to be used outdoors, which is fairly unique, like a Magic Leap or HoloLens, or even one of these other, glasses like an OGG or Focals. Like they don't typically work that well outside, especially in sunlight. You have to deal with, I guess there's two challenging technologies. One is your, LiDAR sensor, so the device that's measuring and understanding the real world. Google Tango is one of the first pieces of hardware that was kind of out there doing it. And it basically projected little infrared light dots. And the camera would basically look at those dots to figure out where things were in the real world. But in the sun, those little UV dots disappeared and they couldn't be seen. So Google Tango tracking outdoors typically didn't work very well. And so devices like HoloLens and others that are using similar technology tend to struggle with that positioning outside, whereas Apple's appears to have taken more of an optical approach, and they're looking at raw camera data. So it seems like they've been able to solve the problem of tracking outdoors, which is like half the problem. Then the other half of the problem, which no one really knows if they've solved because they haven't seen any glasses from Apple, is the light projection. So with most of these devices now, it's additive light. So similar to watching like a projector outside, that image gets all washed out unless you have a super powerful light bulb and it's dark outside, right? So the sunlight and the ambient light from outside makes it harder to see projected light. And most of these AR technologies are basically projecting light and mixing it in with the real world. And so one of the challenges to that is that black isn't really projected at all. It's like the absence of light. And so if you're outside on a sunny day and you're trying to look at a black object, you're really not going to see anything. And what would be required, I think, to get good, like kind of true blacks would be some type of lens technology that would be able to filter and or block out the light that's coming in and then paint its own light on top. So if Apple has something like that up its sleeves, that would be really game changing for being able to use this technology outdoors. And it's possible in version 1 of the product, they're not there yet. It might take a couple years and a couple iterations before we start to see proper outdoor performance. But the fact that they've solved or appear to have solved the optical tracking problem is pretty good. So it's an indication that they're at least concerned and thinking about how do you use a pair of glasses outside, which I think is probably one of the biggest hurdles to mass adoption that I've seen in the existing technology.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy what they've probably already been, and you probably know how many years these have already been in the works, but for something to be coming out in like 5-10 years, I'm like, well, okay, then that means I'll probably wait to buy my Apple glasses.
Probably not version 1, yeah.
Right. I'll want, not like the big version, but maybe like the smaller, tiny, or like the contact lens version.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure that they already have something in the works in that regard, right?
Yeah, I mean, you see different research papers and studies, and there was a company, I forget their name, but they're specifically doing, like a contact lens style device, which is a whole new level of challenging.
I'm sorry,
stuff.
but putting
Yeah.
that in my eye sounds, I'm picturing like there's got to be some micro something in there that I don't want coming anywhere near my cornea.
Yeah, and I think some of at least a patent or some of the work that was being done there is like how they could use your, body heat or energy to essentially power the device as well, or to power it like wirelessly. So then you think, additional radiation, etc. There's definitely going to be some interesting challenges, and hopefully, not any complexities around, causing medical issues. But progress is going to continue to happen, and we'll eventually get to a point where it's mass market, mass appeal, and fully, safe. I think safety is probably, one of the biggest concerns first and foremost when they're developing these content and these products. So some of the more futuristic stuff is probably going to take a long time, just because even if it exists, they have to go through all the testing. It's like right now we're in the middle of, COVID-19, and they're rushing to get a vaccine, and that takes, like a year. So you can imagine like how long it's going to take to actually properly test, some implants, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to take a while, but I think, what's cool is that we're sort of seeing the like underlying technology on its way. So we know it's coming. A little bit less dire than the COVID vaccine, but a little bit, so less desired than.
There's definitely different like levels of priority as far as, advancing technology, but it is kind of a trend, I think, that we see that, things that you want to have medically safe do take a lot longer. And, like you said, this product's probably been in development for at least 5 years, probably longer. Apple's been, acquiring different pieces of companies and technologies that collectively, paint a pretty clear picture of what they're envisioning as a product. the biggest, question mark is kind of what's the time frame. And as one of the things about Apple that's interesting is I feel like they historically feel like they were, innovators. And I think I mentioned this before, how, a lot of people think of the iPhone as being the first smartphone, and it's not necessarily the case, or the iPod being one of the first MP3 players. It just happens to be that they wait for the technology to get to a point where they can deliver to a consumer at the right level of, expectations, whether that's price, performance, usability, form factor, and then they package it and market it in a way that makes it feel mainstream. And so the technology that they're kind of putting out there isn't necessarily new. It's just getting to mass market appeal. And so the technology that exists today for the early adopters mostly checks the boxes that I think consumers are going to care about for this product. Again, the biggest one that I haven't seen proof of is the outdoor performance. If they can get outdoor performance, I feel like most of the other factors are already, right, demonstrated with other products, whether it's the form factor, the battery life, the tracking capabilities, the ability to, generate spatial audio or, interesting 3D visuals, or to hide things and then understand the environment. Like, that's all kind of been demonstrated. The outdoor performance is probably a big surprise if they came out with something soon that solved that. That could be, again, a game changer. But I think, again, in history, we will probably think that, oh, Apple invented AR glasses, when in reality, there have been a number of companies that have been pushing this for a while. But that's kind of the recipe or the playbook that I've seen them pursue in the past. So it feels like the time is almost right.
Well, it'll be fun to listen back to this.
Yeah, actually, once historically, we'll see how close or far off our predictions ended up being.
Yeah. So what's your projection? What year?
I still think it's probably likely that we wouldn't see anything until next year, maybe 2022. But I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic that we might see something in 2021. It is interesting that so much has changed in the last few months as far as the global pandemic, and I think companies have focused attention in different areas. So whether or not this is a accelerator or decelerator maybe remains to be seen. I think for us at 3XR, we were initially concerned that customers might not think AR is the most important place to spend their money. However, we found that there's actually been an opposite effect, in that consumers have been spending more time shopping online and expecting more of a visualization and a better experience similar to what they used to get in store, but the stores are closed. So now they're wondering how they can do that online. And so in some ways it almost feels like it accelerates it. And I've seen other rumors saying that like Apple's accelerated their plans due to COVID-19. And, who's to say for sure whether or not this is an accelerant or not, but it feels like more likely than not, it actually accelerates plans, minus, supply chain logistics and other challenges that are naturally being disrupted anyway. And if, depending on how the economy kind of plays out and recovers or doesn't recover, they may find that there's not as much consumer interest or dollars to be spent on something that's more of a, fashion accessory at this point, that is not necessarily a critical device, but more of a evolutionary device. And I think we won't really feel compelled that these, you can't leave home without these glasses, let's say, even when they launch. And that was one of the interesting observations that a fellow panelist had a talk a few years ago, was that until glasses are as critical that you'd go back to your house when you're almost at work to go back and get it, the same way you probably would to get your phone today.
Yeah.
Once those devices are that important in your daily routine, then we're going to see them everywhere. But until then, and if it's more of a novelty or a device for entertainment, and it's not something you'd go back home to get, it's going to take some time, I think, to convince people to spend a lot of money on something that might initially feel like an accessory and, an interesting piece of new technology that is hopefully a fashion statement in a positive way, unlike the Google Glass. Yeah. Anyway, so there's still a few things that I think remain to be seen. But optimistically, I'll say that I think 2021 could be a solid year to launch a product if it's, technically ready.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely going to be a better year in general, 2021. I think,
Yeah,
in general, 2020.
it can only go up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So,
I mean, marketing wise, it would have made sense, thinking 5 years ago that 2020 would be a year, given that 2020 vision is, a term for perfect vision or good vision at least. So it felt like that could have been a good marketing opportunity. I don't think anyone's going to push a product out for
no,
that purpose. So, most likely we'd start seeing some things starting to come out next year.
yeah. Well, we'll have to do sort of like every few episodes or like every five
Yeah,
or
kind of check back in and see,
yeah,
what's the latest news and rumors. Probably in the fall, Apple themselves will release some more updates, whether that's new devices or refinements to some of the software. iOS 14 was announced at the developer conference, but I don't remember what the roadmap is for actually getting it out to people beyond like a beta state.
yeah.
And so it's possible that once that actually gets out into the public and more people are using it, there could be more emphasis on the AR capabilities.
Cool. Well, we'll have to, I think this was a really interesting sort of like where we see things right now with the Apple Glass technology and what's to come. I'm waiting for some sort of a release of like these are the frames that we'll have and in these color options. But
Yeah.
I
I mean,
think that
typically the way they like to do it is like, Tim Cook will come out on stage and like wear them and be
yeah,
like, you can buy them today and, pick them up tomorrow or, get them next week. They're pretty sneaky about, launching products quickly. Like they surprised me with the iPad Pro that it was available kind of randomly in April. So I don't know. It's a big secret to keep if they're producing these at scale at a factory. So maybe there will be more of a intro like that, where they're like, here's what they look like. You can get them next year.
yeah,
Because it is going to be hard to keep it a secret. I'm sure a lot of these tech blogs pay good money for any of that leaked content.
yeah,
So yeah, I'm sure it's a difficult job for them to keep as tight-lipped as they do.
right. Well, we'll have to check back in the fall and see where things are at. But
Mhm.
for now, I think, you know, we'll see. It's very much a big question mark, but really cool just to see all of the technology and the stepping stones towards Apple glasses, which if you were to ask me a year ago if I thought, this was something that was even on the radar or that I would even be interested in, I would have told you what?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the mindset for most consumers. I mean, now that you've been pulled into this world with us, you can see like where we're excited and why. But I
Yeah.
think the average consumer has no clue, and until they actually try them on, which is another challenge with this class of product, especially VR like suffered this, is until you try it, it's hard to appreciate
Yeah.
what it actually does. With AR, you can probably get away with some more, video pass-through imagery. I felt like Google Glass actually did an interesting job of explaining the concept. This is years ago, maybe 2012, 2013. And they had a video on YouTube that was showing, heads-up navigation and, translation and all these other interesting things that at the time the device wasn't capable of. But it got people's imaginations going and they were able to do that, convey that with video. So it's possible that Apple gets the message across through some video content, and then I think the more you see it in the real world, when you're, well, not that we're riding public transportation that much these days, but when you're out and about and seeing people with their masks and their glasses, you think, oh, maybe I should get some of those too. It'll probably have that effect. The
Yeah.
AirPods will probably like that, and the watch as well. So again, Apple has a way of kind of convincing people that their products look good and make them feel good about themselves. And so if they can do that, rather than, again, the opposite what happened with Google Glass, which, even the people that bought them, I think initially, and surprisingly, I'm actually not one of those people. I never bought one, even though I do have a lot of early tech products. That particular product just didn't feel like it was ready at the time. So I was never convinced to buy one. But I think if I had bought one, I wouldn't have actually worn it anywhere because of the negative connotation. And so that's kind of the worst thing that could happen to Apple, is if people have a huge backlash against anyone they see wearing them. But I don't think that'd be the case given their history of making their products desirable.
Yeah, I think as long as they can kind of stay in like a healthy state in the media and be in, a forward-looking.
Yeah, and if their device that's tracking the world is not recording video and it's using kind of LiDAR technology, I think it gives people an additional level of comfort, or at least complexity, and they're going to think, well, at least they're not recording a video of me, so it feels a little more safe, even though of course it opens up a whole another can of privacy concerns. But
yeah,
that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, we'll have to. I didn't even think about that. Now I have so many questions, but we'll have to.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole episode on privacy concerns around AR, VR, XR technology.
Yeah.
They open up a whole host of additional questions, as does voice technology too. So we can maybe talk about how consumer opinions have changed around microphones placed everywhere in your house. So there's, I think mindsets that change and evolve over time depending on what you're getting from a product.
Yeah. I just added it to our list.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, sign off for today.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone for listening. As always, like, share, subscribe, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for joining us this week on the 3XR podcast. Make sure to visit our website, 3xr.com, where you can subscribe to the show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate you simply telling a friend about it. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. Thanks for being a part of the 3XR community.